Commander Allison Wright stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel, watching the massive Galactic Council station grow larger against the backdrop of stars. After 20 years in the Navy, she had thought nothing could make her nervous anymore. She was wrong. "Ready for this?" asked Dr. Eric Martinez, joining her at the window. His dark eyes were tired but determined. "As ready as anyone can be when telling an ancient space federation that doom is coming," she replied with a thin smile. The council station was a marvel of engineering, a spinning wheel of gleaming metal and crystal nearly 5 miles in diameter. Humans had only been granted observer status 9 years ago, in 2148, and they were still seen as the newcomers, the primitives, the species that had only recently stopped killing each other long enough to reach the stars. "Ambassador Powell wants us in the briefing room," Eric said, checking his tablet. The sensor data just finished processing. Allison nodded and followed him through the ship's corridors. 9 years of integration into the galactic community had been hard for humanity. Their technology was centuries behind most council races. Their diplomatic efforts were often dismissed as naive. Their warnings were ignored. And now, this Ambassador Catherine Powell was waiting in the briefing room. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her blue suit crisp and formal. She looked up as they entered. "The council has granted us 15 minutes to present," she said without preamble. "Make them count." Eric connected his tablet to the display, and the room filled with holographic images of deep space sensor readings. 3 months ago, our deep space array detected these anomalies in the outer reach, he explained. "At first we thought it was an equipment malfunction, because that's what the council told us when we asked for verification," Allison added. "They said our sensors were primitive and unreliable." Catherine's mouth tightened. "And now?" "Now we have proof," Eric said, expanding one section of the display. "These aren't random signals. There's a pattern, a deliberate one. Something is crossing into our space from somewhere else, not just another part of the galaxy. Somewhere outside." The 3 humans stared at the display in silence. Strange, pulsing signals formed a clear pattern across the sectors of space near the abandoned Krell territories. Sectors that no council race regularly patrolled. "They won't believe us," Catherine finally said. "Not without more." "We have more," Allison replied, bringing up her own data. 3 unmanned probes have gone silent in that region. Before they did, they sent back these. The images were blurry but chilling. Dark shapes moving against the stars, distorting the very space around them. Objects that didn't reflect light so much as absorb it. "We're ready," Eric said. 2 hours later, they stood before the Galactic Council. 28 representatives from the most powerful species in known space looked down at them from a semicircle of elevated platforms. Most wore expressions of boredom or thinly veiled contempt. "The humans have requested this emergency session to present what they claim is evidence of a threat to council space," announced the central speaker, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin. "They have been granted 15 minutes. Catherine stepped forward. "Esteemed council representatives, we come before you with grave news. Our deep space sensors have detected anomalies that suggest an incursion from beyond known space." A murmur ran through the assembly. Not of concern, of amusement. "Again with the doomsaying," said Zarthul, the Veloxian representative. His scaled face twisted into what passed for a smile in his species. First it was the cosmic radiation spikes near Orion, then the supposed microbial contamination on Proxima b. Always threats that conveniently only human sensors can detect. Allison felt her face grow hot, but Catherine remained calm. "If you'll allow Dr. Martinez to present our findings, more primitive sensor readings?" interrupted another counselor, triggering scattered laughter. Zarthul raised a clawed hand. "Indulge them. Let us see what monsters the humans have imagined this time." Eric stepped forward, his face composed. For 30 minutes, the council had at least granted them extra time for their presentation. He methodically laid out the evidence, the sensor readings, the lost probes, the pattern of disturbances. These anomalies match no known natural phenomenon, he concluded. They're deliberate and organized. Something is coming through from somewhere else. We recommend immediate deployment of investigative forces to the region and preparation of defensive measures. Silence fell when he finished. Allison allowed herself a moment of hope. The evidence was clear. Surely they would see. Then Zarthul laughed, a high, chittering sound that was quickly joined by others. Remarkable creativity, he said. Truly, humans excel at generating fear from random data. Perhaps it's your evolutionary history as prey animals that makes you so jumpy. This isn't random, Allison cut in, unable to stay silent. We've triple verified every reading. With human technology, Zarthul dismissed with a wave. Technology that still relies on electromagnetic principles we abandoned centuries ago. The central speaker raised a hand for silence. Has any council member detected similar anomalies, also? Around the chamber, representatives shook their heads or made equivalent gestures of negation. The archivists have records of similar patterns, said a small gray being near the back, from the dissolution era. The records are incomplete, but ancient history and human paranoia, interrupted Zarthul, a waste of council resources. We should at least send a probe, Catherine insisted. The area will be added to the regular patrol schedule, the central speaker said dismissively. In 6 months when resources permit. 6 months will be too late, Eric said, his voice rising. These incursions are accelerating. Whatever's coming through is getting bigger each time. Zarthul sighed dramatically. I move we conclude this presentation and vote on the human recommendation. The vote was quick and decisive. 27 against, 1 in favor, the archivist. As they were escorted from the chamber, Zarthul approached them. No hard feelings, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Your species is young. You see threats everywhere because your own history is nothing but conflict. You'll learn in time. Catherine straightened to her full height, which still only reached the Veloxian's chest. You mistake our caution for fear, she said quietly. History has taught humans to expect the worst, and to prepare for it anyway. 3 days later they were back on their ship, preparing to return to Earth with the news of their failure, when the emergency transmission came through. A border outpost in the exact region they had identified had gone silent. No distress call, no sign of attack, just silence. It had begun. 6 months had passed since the border outpost went silent. 6 months of more disappearances, more communications blackouts, and more dismissals from the Galactic Council. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, staring at the main view screen as his ship approached the location of the latest incident. Dropping out of FTL in 30 seconds, Captain, said his navigator, Lieutenant Samantha Wells. Daniel nodded, his face grim. The Horizon was one of Earth's newest scout vessels, small, fast, and equipped with Dr. Lisa Chen's experimental sensor array. Not that the Council knew about that last part. They still believed human technology was primitive and unreliable. That belief had become a useful cover. Ready on sensors, Dr. Chen? He asked. The physicist looked up from her console and gave a quick nod. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Ready, Captain. If there's anything to detect, we'll find it. The ship shuddered slightly as it returned to normal space. The view screen showed a field of stars, and at its center, a small planetoid where a Veloxian mining colony had been established 50 years ago. There were no lights visible on its surface, no signs of activity, no distress signals, reported Communications Officer Ryan Patel. No communications of any kind. Life signs? Daniel asked. Scanning, said Dr. Chen. She frowned at her readings. Nothing definitive. But Captain, I'm detecting those quantum displacement signatures again, just like at the other sites. Daniel moved to look over her shoulder. The strange readings had become familiar over the past 6 months. Energy patterns that didn't match any known technology or natural phenomenon. Patterns that only Chen's experimental sensors could detect. Begin standard search pattern, he ordered, and prep a shuttle. I want boots on the ground. 4 hours later, Daniel led a small team through the abandoned corridors of the Veloxian colony. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just emptiness. It's like everyone just vanished, said Security Chief Alan Peterson, his hand resting on his weapon. Not vanished, said Lisa Chen, studying her handheld scanner. The quantum signatures are strongest here in what appears to be the colony's main gathering hall. Whatever happened, it happened here first. Daniel knelt and touched the floor. There was a fine, dark powder covering the surface. He rubbed it between his fingers. Take samples of everything, he ordered. I want full analysis before we leave. Back on the horizon, the news wasn't good. It's molecular degradation, Lisa explained, showing Daniel and his senior staff the results. The powder we found? It's what's left of the flooring material, and likely, the colonists themselves. A heavy silence fell over the briefing room. How? Daniel finally asked. The best theory I have is that it's related to the quantum displacements. Something is unraveling the basic structure of matter, breaking down the atomic bonds. Intelligence analyst Lucas Miller, who had been quietly studying the data, spoke up. This reminds me of something. There are old Earth myths, really old, like pre-spaceflight old, about beings that could unmake reality. Myths won't help us, Miller, Daniel said. Maybe they will, Lisa countered. What if those myths were based on some encounter in the distant past, something humanity forgot about consciously but preserved in stories? Before they could discuss further, an alert sounded. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command, Ryan reported over the comm system. Admiral John Carter's face appeared on the screen, looking even more serious than usual. Hayes, return to Earth immediately. The Council has finally acknowledged we have a situation. They're sending a representative to discuss joint action. What changed their minds, sir? Daniel asked. The Veloxian homeworld just lost contact with its largest space station. 12,000 lives. Even Zarthul can't ignore that. 3 days later, Daniel stood in a conference room at Earth Command headquarters in Geneva. The walls were lined with screens showing data from all known incident sites. Dr. Chen was explaining her findings to a grim-faced Council General Vexmore, who commanded the Council's military forces. So you're saying these quantum displacements are like tears in the fabric of reality? The General asked, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. More like doors, Lisa clarified. Something is coming through from somewhere else. Another dimension, possibly. Our universe exists alongside countless others, separated by barriers that normally can't be crossed. And now they can, said Lucas Miller, who had been invited to present his research. I've been comparing Dr. Chen's readings with ancient human texts. The patterns match descriptions in mythologies from at least 7 different Earth cultures, all describing entities they called devourers or unmakers. General Vexmore looked skeptical. You expect me to base military strategy on human folk? Tales? No, said Admiral Carter, entering the room. We expect you to base it on the evidence. The fact that our myths align with current events is just another data point. Vexmore sighed, a whistling sound through his breathing slits. The Council has authorized me to form a joint task force, but understand this, we lead, you follow. Your ships will supplement our fleet. With respect, General, Admiral Carter said, we'll contribute as equal partners or not at all. Your advanced technology didn't even detect the threat until it was destroying your colonies. Before Vexmore could respond, another officer burst into the room. Admiral, General, we've lost contact with the patrol fleet near Centauri Prime. Everyone rushed to the main operations center. On the large strategic display, a section of space that had contained 20 Council ships now showed nothing but static. How long ago? Demanded Vexmore. 17 minutes, sir. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen. Could your sensors detect what happened? If we got there quickly enough? She nodded. The quantum traces fade after about 6 hours. I can have the horizon ready to jump in 30 minutes, Daniel said. Admiral Carter glanced at Vexmore, who gave a reluctant nod. Do it, Carter ordered. But be careful, Hayes. Observe only. Do not engage. 2 hours later, the horizon emerged from FTL at the edge of the Centauri system. Daniel immediately ordered full stealth protocols. Quantum displacement signatures are off the charts, Lisa reported, her voice tight. And there's something else out there. The view screen adjusted, showing a section of seemingly empty space. But as they watched, the stars behind it bent, twisted, and then vanished, replaced by absolute darkness. "What the hell is that?" whispered Lieutenant Wells. "I think," Lucas Miller said softly, "we're looking at a void walker, just like in the myths." As they watched in horror, the darkness moved, not toward them but toward the inner system, toward Centauri Prime, with its 5 billion inhabitants. "Send the data back to Earth," Daniel ordered, "and plot an intercept course." "Captain," Ryan protested. Admiral Carter ordered observation only. Daniel's jaw tightened as he watched the darkness spread. Sometimes orders have to be reinterpreted based on conditions on the ground, and right now the ground is about to disappear beneath 5 billion people. "Sir," Lisa said urgently, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup. I think it's preparing to—" She never finished. The horizon shuddered violently as space itself seemed to twist around them. Emergency alarms blared throughout the ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Daniel shouted. "Get us out of here." The ship spun and accelerated away from the darkness, which had suddenly become aware of their presence. As they fled, Daniel saw 3 more dark shapes emerge from what appeared to be a tear in space itself. "Jump to FTL as soon as we're clear," he ordered. The horizon barely escaped, limping back to Earth with its precious data and a warning that would finally make the galaxy take humanity seriously. The Void Walkers had arrived, and Earth's worst fears were now everyone's reality. Admiral John Carter stood at the window of his office at Lunar Command, looking down at the blue marble of Earth. 1 year had passed since Captain Hayes and the USS Horizon had survived their encounter with the Void Walkers. 1 year of desperate battles, shocking losses, and a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed humanity. "Admiral, they're ready for you," said his aide, Lieutenant Grace Wilson. John nodded and turned away from the window. The large conference room was filled with both human officers and representatives from a dozen alien species. At the far end sat High Counselor Drex, the last surviving member of the Galactic Council's leadership. His normally lustrous green skin had dulled with stress and fatigue. "Let's begin," John said as he took his place at the head of the table. "Dr. Romano, your report first." Dr. Sophia Romano, Earth's lead weapons developer, stood and activated the holographic display. "The modified EMP weapons have shown a 67% effectiveness rate against smaller Voidwalker entities," she said. "The larger ones remain problematic. 67% is better than anything the Council achieved in centuries of weapons development," Drex noted, his voice carrying none of the condescension that had once been common when addressing humans. "It's not enough," Sophia replied. "Not when we're losing worlds weekly." The room fell silent. In the past year, 3 major Council homeworlds had fallen to the Void Walkers. Billions of lives lost in moments as entire planets were reduced to clouds of molecular dust. The mighty Veloxian Empire, once the most technologically advanced civilization in known space, had been reduced to refugee fleets begging for safe harbor. "Major Foster, update on ground operations," John prompted. William Foster stood, his face bearing a fresh scar from a recent evacuation mission. "We've successfully implemented the Earth historical warfare protocols on 6 worlds," he reported. "Low-tech resistance cells equipped with analog communications have managed to delay Voidwalker advance by an average of 17 days, compared to 2 days for conventional Council defenses." 17 days is hardly victory," said a Council military official. "It's 17 days to evacuate civilians," William countered. 17 days that wouldn't exist otherwise. John intervened before the discussion could become heated. "The point is that our approach is working better than the alternatives. The Voidwalkers target and neutralize advanced technology first. Our more primitive methods slip under their notice." "Primitive," Drex repeated with a strange expression. We mocked your species for that very quality. Now it may save what remains of galactic civilization. The meeting continued with reports of fleet movements, refugee resettlements, and the ongoing research into the nature of the Void Walkers. When it concluded, John asked Drex to remain behind. You didn't mention the real reason for your visit, John said once they were alone. Drex's large eyes blinked slowly. News travels quickly. We may not have your technology, but our intelligence. Networks are quite effective. The alien sighed, a whistling sound through his breathing slits. The remaining council members have voted. We wish to formally request that Earth assume leadership of the war effort. Despite having expected this, John was still surprised to hear it stated so plainly. That's quite a reversal from being dismissed as paranoid primitives. Pride has no place when facing extinction, Admiral. Your species has demonstrated an adaptability that ours lack. You've survived dozens of near-extinction events in your history. We never faced such trials. Until now, John finished. Until now, Drex agreed. Will you accept? John thought of the refugee ships orbiting Earth. Millions of aliens who had once looked down on humanity now depending on them for survival. I'll need to consult with Earth government. But personally, yes. Later that day, John visited the research facility where Dr. Romano and Dr. Chen were working together on what they called the last resort. Progress? He asked as he entered their lab. Lisa looked up from a complex holographic model. We've confirmed the theory, Admiral. Human brainwave patterns naturally disrupt Voidwalker communication. It explains why they've had such difficulty with our forces and why they haven't directly attacked Earth yet. Can we use it as a weapon? Sophia nodded. We're calling it the resonance weapon. It amplifies human brainwave patterns and projects them as a field. In theory, it could collapse the quantum bridges the Voidwalkers use to enter our space. In theory, John repeated. We need a live test, Lisa admitted. But the power requirements are substantial. How substantial? The scientists exchanged glances. It would require a dedicated power plant, Sophia said carefully, and direct neural connection to a human pilot. John understood the implication. You're talking about a suicide mission. We're working on ways to shield the pilot, Lisa said quickly. But yes, as it stands, deployment would likely be one way. John nodded grimly. Keep working on the shielding, but proceed as if that's our option, because if things keep going this way, we'll need to take that risk. As he left the research facility, John received an urgent message. Reports were coming, and from the outer system. A massive Voidwalker fleet had been detected near Jupiter. On the front lines, Major Foster and his ground forces were evacuating the last human research base on Europa. The ice moon shuddered as dark shapes moved across its surface, leaving trails of molecular dust where solid matter had once existed. Move! Final transport leaves in 3 minutes, William shouted to the remaining scientists as they loaded crucial equipment. A young researcher stumbled, dropping a case of samples. William rushed to help her but paused as he glanced up at Jupiter through Europa's thin atmosphere. The gas giant's great red spot was changing, darkening. At its center, a blackness deeper than space was forming. Major, said his communications officer, voice shaking. Command says that's not a storm anymore, it's a gateway. William stared in horror as he realized what was happening. The Voidwalkers weren't just sending scouts anymore. They were creating a permanent way into our reality. Back on Earth, emergency alarms sounded in every city as the Voidwalker threat reached the heart of the solar system. In the United Earth Government headquarters, Secretary General Olivia Martinez stood before the assembled representatives of humanity. Today I am activating Protocol Pandora, she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of her decision. All banned weapon systems are hereby reauthorized for immediate deployment. A murmur ran through the assembly. Protocol Pandora was the code name for Earth's darkest military secrets. Weapons so terrible they had been banned by unanimous global agreement after the last war of 2089. The Council refugees must be informed, said one representative. They already know, Olivia replied. High Counselor Drex has been briefed and has given the Council's blessing. They understand that conventional methods have failed. As her words echoed through the chamber, in orbit above Earth, Admiral Carter was already mobilizing the combined fleet. Human ships alongside the remnants of once great Council armadas, preparing for what might be their final stand. The ancient warning systems, created by paranoid humans who were always preparing for the worst, were now the galaxy's last hope. The same species that had been mocked for their fears now stood as the final barrier between existence and nothingness. And deep in their research lab, Dr. Romano and Dr. Chen worked frantically to complete the resonance weapon, knowing that time was running out for everyone. 2 years into the war, Earth had become the last major stronghold in the galaxy. The once beautiful blue planet was now surrounded by defensive platforms, military vessels, and the ships of countless refugees who had nowhere else to go. Secretary General Olivia Martinez stood in the United Earth Government's Emergency Command Center, watching the holographic display of the solar system. The Jupiter Gateway has grown another 12% since yesterday, reported her military advisor. At this rate, it will be fully stable in less than 2 weeks. Olivia's face remained calm, though her eyes betrayed her concern. And the evacuation of the outer colonies? Mars is at 93% complete. The lunar bases are being converted to additional military installations as planned. She nodded, then turned to face Representative Clothar, the appointed spokesperson. For the Refugee Council species. The tall, slender alien looked out of place among the human military personnel, but these days, such differences meant little. They were all fighting for survival. Your people's assistance with the shield technology has bought us precious time, Olivia said. Thank you. Clothar bowed slightly. We contribute what we can, though I must admit many of my people are struggling to understand your methods. Which methods specifically? Yesterday I observed children practicing hiding in primitive shelters, playing games involving hiding from dangers, being taught to use simple tools and weapons that require no power sources. Olivia smiled slightly. Ah, you're referring to Operation Throwback. Is it wise to frighten children with such preparation? Representative humans have always prepared our young for the worst while hoping for the best. It's how our species survived countless disasters, wars, and near-extinction events. Clothar seemed troubled. The Council records show that your planet has never faced invasion from an outside species before us. No, but we've faced plenty of dangers from within. Our history is filled with moments where civilization nearly collapsed. Each time it was the prepared who survived. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the main screen. Madam Secretary, the combined fleet has engaged a Void Walker advance force near the Mars orbit. We're holding for now, but we've detected unusual activity at the Jupiter Gateway. Define unusual, John. Something big is coming through, bigger than anything we've seen before. Olivia turned to her staff. Activate Protocol Pandora Phase 2. And tell Doctors Romano and Chen I need an update on the resonance weapon immediately. In the research facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Lisa Chen worked frantically on the final calibrations for the resonance weapon prototype. The device filled most of the large chamber, a complex array of machinery surrounding a central pilot's chair that resembled a medical scanner, but bristled with neural interfaces. Dr. Sofia Romano entered the lab, her face showing the strain of too many sleepless nights. The Secretary General wants an update. Tell her it's ready for testing, Lisa replied without looking up from her work. But we still haven't solved the pilot survival problem. Sophia moved closer to examine the chair. The neural load is too much for any human brain to handle without permanent damage. Without fatal damage, Lisa corrected grimly. Even with the modifications directing that much psychic energy would burn out the pilot's neural pathways within minutes. Then we're asking someone to die. To save everyone else, yes. The two women fell silent, contemplating the terrible choice ahead of them. Finally, Sophia spoke. I'll make the call. But first, let's double-check everything. If someone is going to sacrifice themselves, we damn well better make sure it works. Above them, in Earth's orbit, the combined fleet was returning from the battle at Mars. The human vessels showed extensive damage, but most had survived. The alien ships had not fared as well. Their advanced technology made them prime targets for the Void Walkers, while the relatively simpler human vessels could sometimes slip past the enemy's notice. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Carter received a transmission from Captain Daniel Hayes of the USS Horizon. "Admiral, we've completed the reconnaissance of the Jupiter Gateway as ordered," Daniel reported. His face was gaunt, his eyes haunted by all he had seen over the past 2 years. "The data is being transmitted now." John examined the incoming information. "Is this accurate, a structure that size?" "Yes, sir. They're not just sending ships through anymore. They're preparing to move their entire civilization into our reality." The Admiral's face hardened. "Return to Earth immediately." "Captain, I think it's time for the last resort." Hours later, in a secure briefing room, Secretary General Martinez, Admiral Carter, and the research team met with Captain Hayes and other key military leaders. "The resonance weapon is our only option at this point," John explained, displaying the data from the Jupiter Gateway. "Conventional weapons aren't even slowing them down anymore. The weapon works by projecting amplified human brainwave patterns," Dr. Chen explained. "These patterns naturally disrupt the quantum fields the Voidwalkers use to maintain their presence in our reality. If deployed at the heart of the gateway, it could collapse the entire structure and trap them in their own dimension." Olivia finished. "Exactly," said Sophia. "But there's a cost. The weapon requires a human pilot, a living human brain to generate the patterns, and the neural interface is fatal to the pilot." A heavy silence fell over the room. "I'll do it," said Captain Hayes suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "Daniel," John began. "With respect, Admiral, the Horizon is the fastest ship we have. It's already been retrofitted with Dr. Chen's sensors, and I've had more direct contact with the Void Walkers than anyone who's lived to talk about it. I'm the logical choice. No one could argue with his logic, though many wanted to. I'll need a few days to prepare my ship and crew," Daniel continued. "And Dr. Chen will need to install the weapon." Lisa nodded. "I've been working on modifications that might give you a chance to escape after triggering the device. No promises, but I'm not giving up on bringing you home." As the meeting ended, Representative Clothar approached Daniel. "Captain, I have been documenting human methods of warfare for what remains of the Council archives. Would you permit me to interview you before your mission?" Daniel looked surprised but nodded. "May I ask why?" "Your species has shown remarkable resilience, the very qualities we once mocked. Your paranoia, your constant preparation for disaster, your retention of primitive skills, have proven to be your greatest strengths. The galaxy needs to remember these lessons, should any of us survive." Later, that evening, Secretary General Martinez addressed the combined population of Earth and the refugee fleets. Her image was broadcast to every settlement, every ship, and every military installation. 2 years ago, a threat emerged that many dismissed as impossible, she began. But humanity has always prepared for the impossible, while others enjoyed millennia of peace and prosperity. We never forgot what it meant to fight for survival. We never stopped preparing for the worst. The speech continued, outlining the plan for Operation Thermopylae, the mission to collapse the Jupiter Gateway, using the resonance weapon. She did not mention the likely sacrifice of Captain Hayes and his volunteer crew. That burden was hers to bear. As she spoke, across Earth and throughout the refugee fleets, people of 100 different species listened. Many had once looked down on humans as primitive, paranoid, and backward. Now they watched in awe as this young species stood ready to sacrifice everything to save a galaxy that had once laughed at their warnings. The day of Operation Thermopylae arrived. Earth's combined fleet, human ships alongside the remains of once mighty alien armadas, gathered at the edge of Mars' orbit. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching as the last of Dr. Chen's equipment was installed. "Final checks complete, Captain," his first officer reported. "The resonance weapon is online and stable." Daniel nodded. The device took up most of what had been the ship's cargo hold. At its heart was a pilot's chair surrounded by a web of sensors and neural interfaces that would connect directly to his brain. If everything went according to plan, his brainwave patterns, amplified 1,000,000 times, would collapse the Jupiter gateway and seal the Void Walkers back in their own dimension. If everything went according to plan. But things rarely did in war. "Message from Admiral Carter, sir," said Communications Officer Ryan Patel. "The fleet is in position. We launch in 30 minutes. Acknowledged. Please ask Dr. Chen to meet me in my ready room." When Lisa arrived, Daniel could see the strain on her face. She had worked non-stop for days, making final adjustments to give him even the slightest chance of survival. "Is it ready?" he asked. She nodded. "The modifications are complete. They should give you a 90-second window to activate the emergency escape pod after triggering the weapon. Should? It's untested technology fighting an enemy we barely understand," she said with a sad smile. "But if anyone can make it work, it's you." Daniel looked at the small device she handed him, a neural shield no bigger than his thumb. "Thank you, Lisa, for everything. Just come back alive, Captain. That's all the thanks I need." Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening as soldiers and crew prepared for what might be their final battle. On the flagship, Admiral Carter addressed the combined forces. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the right of all sentient life to exist free from the threat of annihilation," he said, his voice steady and determined. "Our mission is simple but vital. Hold the line long enough for the Horizon to deliver the resonance weapon to the heart of the enemy gateway." In the command center on Earth, Secretary General Martinez watched the fleet's preparations alongside Representative Clothar and other alien dignitaries. "Your people fight with remarkable courage," Clothar observed. "We fight because we must," Olivia replied. "Humans have always found strength when backed into a corner." "The Council never understood that about your species," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Zarthul, the once arrogant Veloxian representative who had dismissed human warnings years ago. "Counselor Zarthul," Olivia said, surprised. "I thought you were aboard the flagship." "I requested transfer to the escort squadron," he said. "I will be accompanying the Horizon on its final approach." "That's a suicide mission," Clothar said. Zarthul's scaled face showed what might have been a smile. "Perhaps, but I have a debt to repay. Had I listened when humans first warned us, billions might still be alive." The attack began exactly as planned. The main fleet engaged the Voidwalker forces surrounding the Jupiter gateway, drawing their attention away from the small group of fast ships escorting the Horizon. Daniel watched from his bridge as the battle unfolded. Even after 2 years of fighting these enemies, the sight of the Voidwalkers still chilled him. Dark shapes that seemed to bend light around them, leaving trails of disintegrated matter in their wake. "Escort squadron formed up and ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Wells. "Take us in," Daniel ordered. "Maximum speed." The small group of ships accelerated toward Jupiter, the massive gas giant now partially obscured by the swirling darkness of the gateway. It had grown to nearly 3 times the size of the Great Red Spot, a wound in reality that leaked darkness into their universe. "Multiple contacts approaching," warned Security Chief Peterson. "They've spotted us. Escort squadron moving to intercept," Wells reported. On the view screen, Daniel watched as the escort ships, a mix of human and alien vessels, moved to protect the Horizon. Among them was Zarthul's ship, taking point position. "We've got a direct channel from Counselor Zarthul," said Ryan. The Veloxian's face appeared on screen. "Captain Hayes, we'll clear your path. Just make sure that weapon works." "We appreciate the escort, Counselor." "No," Zarthul said firmly. "No appreciation necessary. This is atonement." Before Daniel could respond, the escort ships engaged the approaching Void Walkers. The battle was brief but intense. One by one, the escort ships were torn apart or reduced to dust. But they did their job. The Horizon broke through. "We're clear," Wells reported. "Approaching the gateway perimeter. 2 minutes to optimal firing position." Daniel rose from his chair. "You have the bridge, Lieutenant. Keep us steady until I activate the weapon." His crew watched in silence as he left the bridge. They all knew what he was about to do. They all understood the sacrifice. In the cargo hold, Daniel settled into the pilot's chair of the resonance weapon. Dr. Chen's voice came through his communicator as the neural interfaces attached themselves to his skull. "Remember, you have 90 seconds. After activation," she said, "the escape pod is pre-programmed to return to Earth." "Understood," he replied calmly. "Approaching optimal position," Wells reported. "Gateway directly ahead." Daniel looked through the viewport at the massive tear in space-time. Through it, he could see glimpses of the Voidwalker's home dimension, a place of absolute darkness where the laws of physics seemed to bend and break. And emerging from that darkness was something enormous, a shape so vast it defied comprehension. "Their homeworld," he whispered. "They're moving their entire world through. 30 seconds to optimal position," came Wells's voice. Daniel took a deep breath and activated the neural interfaces. Immediately, pain shot through his body as the machine began amplifying his brainwaves. Through the haze of agony, he saw the horizon sensors detecting his ship. "Voidwalkers approaching from all sides," Peterson warned. "They know what we're doing." Suddenly, a familiar ship appeared between the horizon and the nearest attackers. Zarthul's vessel, damaged but still fighting. "Go, Captain," came the Veloxian's voice distorted by static. "We'll hold them off." With the last of his strength, Daniel activated the resonance weapon. Energy surged through the neural interfaces as his amplified brainwave patterns shot out in all directions. The effect was immediate. The Voidwalkers closest to the ship began to dissolve, their unstable forms unable to maintain cohesion. But more importantly, the gateway itself began to shudder. The edges of the tear contracted, slowly at first, then faster. Through pain-blurred eyes, Daniel saw Zarthul's ship disintegrate as it rammed a Voidwalker that was approaching the horizon. The sacrifice bought him the seconds he needed. 90 seconds, he gasped, forcing his hand to the emergency release. The escape pod ejected just as the horizon broke apart under the strain of the weapon's energy. As his tiny pod tumbled away from the collapsing gateway, Daniel's last conscious thought was of Earth, the planet that had always prepared for the worst and by doing so, had saved the galaxy that once mocked it. 3 weeks later, Daniel woke in a hospital bed on Earth. Dr. Chen was sitting beside him, her eyes lighting up as she saw him stir. "You made it," she said, taking his hand. "The gateway?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Completely collapsed. The Voidwalkers are sealed away in their own dimension." Secretary General Martinez visited him later that day, along with Admiral Carter and, surprisingly, Representative Clothar. "Captain Hayes," the alien said formally, "the remaining council races have unanimously voted to offer Earth permanent leadership of the new Galactic Alliance. Your species has earned it through both wisdom and sacrifice." Olivia smiled at Daniel's surprised expression. Turns out being the paranoid, always prepared species has its advantages. As Earth began the long process of rebuilding and helping the refugee species find new homes, a memorial was erected in Geneva. It honored those who had fallen in the Void War, with a special tribute to Zarthul and the escort squadron who had made the final mission possible. At the base of the memorial were inscribed the words Ambassador Powell had spoken years before, when the Council had first dismissed humanity's warnings. "You mistake our caution for fear. History has taught humans to expect the worst and to overcome it anyway." Throughout the galaxy, species that had once laughed at human paranoia now embraced their methods of preparation and contingency planning. The lesson had been learned at terrible cost. Sometimes the ones who seem most foolish for preparing for disaster are the only ones who survive when disaster finally comes.